Good evening, members. Welcome to this evening's online session, our Travels in Italy. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the events managers at the Wine Society. If you've not joined us for one of our online events before, or if you are a frequent flyer with us, welcome back. It's lovely to have you. So for this evening's session, we are going to do a bit of a taste through of suggested 6 wines, as you can see behind us. And we would love to know what you think of them, if you are joining with the wines, if it's all or some. So do use the chat for that. And if you've got any questions about the wines or about Italian wine in general, or Italy as a wine growing region, do pop it in the Q&A and we will get to those as well as we go through this sort of hour of wine. I'm delighted to be joined by Victoria, who is one of our new society buyers. You may have seen her on our socials already, or seen some emails from her. And yeah, we're thrilled to be doing the first online event with you. So if you'd like to introduce yourself a bit, Victoria, and maybe what we're going to be doing this evening.
Yeah, of course. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you tonight. As Catherine said, I have recently joined the Society, albeit it's now 3 months ago. The 3 months have flown. I'm covering Sarah Knowles's maternity leave. So many of you will know Sarah as our Italy buyer for the last 5 or 6 years. Sarah is also actually a dear friend of mine. We've known each other from the wine trade for a number of years. And I have been, so in my previous roles, I was buying Italy. So I've been buying Italy since 2019. It's a real passion of mine. So it's an absolute thrill to come to the society and to get the chance to cover this region and to, I think, buy one of the most broad and deep ranges that is out there. So yes, so I was previously at Waitrose, and before that I was at a fine wine merchant called Bordeaux Index. And yeah, delighted to join you this evening.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting hour. And I think when we were first discussing the kind of the premise for this event, we were thinking, oh, Italy as a region, it's somewhere that people can be really quite familiar with things like, Pinot Grigio, Chianti, even Barolo to some extent. But there's so much it has to offer that is a little bit different. And we're hoping that with these wines and with this session that we're doing, we'll have a little bit more of an explore of those wines and regions and the other sort of things that you can find in Italy.
Yeah. So to kick off with a brief introduction to what the Greeks called Oenotria, the land of wine. So Italy with France is one of the biggest wine producers in the world. It's always within that top 2. Last year it was actually number 2 to France, largely due to really high mildew pressure in the season, which reduced crops. But it has almost 750,000 hectares under vine. And what, from a buyer's perspective, both as a professional buyer and also as a personal buyer, what is so exciting about Italy is just the sheer diversity of grape varieties, of indigenous grape varieties specifically. So there's a dazzling array, and not only is there a dazzling array of grapes, they have a dazzling array of names for those grapes. So almost every grape has a whole host of different names depending on the region, or different dialect versions. So if you take something like Sangiovese, which is the most widely planted red grape, that's known as Brunello in Montalcino. It's known as Morellino in Scanzano, so further down on the Tuscan coast. It's known as Prunolo in Montepulciano. So whenever you go to Italy, on a buying trip, you can guarantee that you're going to either discover a new grape. It's kind of staggering how many times you can travel to the country and come across a new grape, or if not a new grape, a new name for a grape that you knew already. All of this means it's the perfect hunting ground for new discoveries, wines that you haven't tasted before. And what many of you will know is that Italian grapes they don't really get exported. You don't see many indigenous Italian grapes grow successfully elsewhere in the world, which shows how deeply they're connected with their individual terroir. The other thing that's super exciting about Italy is just the diversity of styles that are made there, the sort of ingenuity of the Italians. So many wine styles have sort of traditionally come from the country, whether that's the tank method for sparkling wine production with Prosecco, whether it's dried grape wines, both the Passito style sweet wines, as well as wines like Amarone. There's just the sort of, there's no ends to the kind of exploration that Italians do when it comes to making wine. So today's lineup, we're going to start from the north, go down to the south, back up to the north, and give you just the tiniest snapshot of the diversity of Italy's many terroirs. I am just going to share with you a quote, which I think if you could sum up Italy in 2 sentences, very difficult to do. But this quote does it so beautifully. So this is from the World Atlas of Wine. So this is Jancis Robinson. And what she says is that Italy has the world's richest variety of individual wine styles, distinctive terroirs, and indigenous grape varieties. At the top end, her wines have a vivacity, originality, savour, and flair all their own. And I think just focusing on that all their own, these wines really are distinctive when grown well and made well. And hopefully we will see some of that today.
Absolutely. I think that's a real key point to hone in on, isn't it? Is their individuality. Because when we're going through the wines, there will be elements of us talking like, if you're more familiar with this style or this grape variety, you may find that this one is one you like, but actually they're not necessarily comparable in the same way that you perhaps could with other regions. They do have their own individuality that does mean they stand out, but that's just what's the beauty of it, that there is so much choice and so much variety. And so much scope across the regions of Italy as well, right from the north down to the south. It's a really exciting place to get wine from.
Yeah, and I think the other point to make, when you've got lesser known varieties, obviously we know that the international varieties, there is demand for them all over the world, and therefore the prices match. You can find, and when we come to the second wine today, actually, a great variety that many of you won't have heard of. I think the first time I heard of it was 3 years ago. And it offers incredible bang for its buck, like pound for pound, because it's not a great variety which is going to attract your typical Chardonnay drinker because they haven't heard of it. So it is also a good hunting ground for value as well as for uniqueness.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we go on to wine, I was just going to say, where we will be talking about food, and in front of us we have a little selection of Italian nibbles. The blessing and a curse of Stevenage opening up a really good M&S has been that there's lots of delicious things nearby to the Wine Society HQ. So if you have got some delicious food this evening, or perhaps this is your aperitivo hour and you're getting ready to have a big pasta dinner once you finish watching, we would love to know what you're eating as well, or you maybe want to eat with the wines as we go through them. And we may do a little bit of nibbling on camera as well. You might just see us randomly eat an olive, so don't be alarmed.
So I think on that note, we've talked for quite long enough without pouring any wine. So we're going to start with, hopefully some of you have got some of the wines to taste along with us, but we're going to start with the Pinot Bianco from Garda Prendina. So we're starting in the northeast of the country, home to some of Italy's most popular styles in Prosecco, of course, and also Pinot Grigio. So given Pinot Grigio is sort of one of the most popular styles, this was an opportunity to explore something similar, but also different. So Pinot Bianco is actually the one grape in our lineup which is not native. So apologies for that. But that said, it has a long and historic connection specifically to the northeast of Italy. Actually more often found further up in the Dolomites, so in Alto Adige, whereas this example is from Lake Garda, but we'll come on to that. So it has actually been planted, it's been planted in the region since the early 19th century. And the use of French varieties in the northeast of Italy. So you've also got Pinot Noir, which is known as Pinot Nero. You've also got Chardonnay, for example. That came in when the Habsburg dynasty ruled, so between the 18th and 19th centuries. And what they sort of imported was these French varieties, but also the sort of named single varietal philosophy, which if you are avid Italian drinkers, you'll know is relatively rare. We most often talk about Italian wines we refer to them by the name of the region rather than by the grape. So that is why you do find wines in this region with a grape variety on the front label. In terms of Pinot Bianco, I should have said, is Pinot Blanc. Its ancestral home or its spiritual home is Alsace. And in terms of its attributes as a grape variety, it's a non-aromatic grape variety. So we put that in the same category as Chardonnay, for example, or Cortese, to use an Italian comparison. Cortese being the grape variety of Gavi di Gavi. I'm glad you're getting stuck in. And Pinot Bianco has, I mean, it has huge fine wine potential. It's used to make dry, mineral, age-worthy whites, as well as kind of fresh, easy to approach, kind of earlier drinking whites. And I think this sort of this fits into that second style. It's designed for drinking and enjoying when it's super fresh, rather than for bottle aging. But I think we have had a quick taste through, obviously, earlier. But when we were tasting just earlier, I think what struck me was that lovely sort of stony mineral note to it. It has got kind of apple aromas and citrus, but it also has a mineral thread.
It does. It's really bright as well. It's that sort of slight salinity to it, maybe like a little preserved lemon zestiness to it, rather than being kind of really super stony mineral. It's got a nice kind of moorishness to it.
I think particularly you get that on the finish, that sort of, as you say, that almost kind of salty, or what you might call it, like something more savoury rather than being super fruit driven.
Yeah, almost like a bit of tang to it. And I did just have a bit of mozzarella. So because it is so fresh and vibrant, and when you have it with something that's got that like creaminess, that lovely balance to it, it's really fresh and refreshing as well. The acidity, it's not stripping. It's again, it adds that lovely Moorish mouthfeel to it. It's really like you're biting into a really nice juicy apple,
but not too tart. Yeah, not too tart an apple. Yeah. So I mean, this would absolutely appeal to those of you who enjoy the sort of crisp, dry whites of the north of Italy. So both in the northeast with your Pinot Grigios and your Soaves, and also the northwest with your Gavis. But I think, I mean, for me, it's probably more, it depends where, it depends. I would say if you're looking at Pinot Grigio at the same price point, this delivers more complexity for me, more persistence, more length on the finish. Oh, excellent. I'm glad to hear that, Richard. So as I mentioned earlier, it's relatively unusual to find Pinot Bianco around Lake Garda. It's much more associated with Alto Adige, and we do have a couple of beautiful Pinot Biancos from the Alto Adige if you wanted to spend a little bit more. But this example, so this is from what is a relatively new DOC known as the Garda DOC, which was created for the area just south of the lake. So you've got this lovely, in being close to the proximity of the lake, as when you're close to the proximity of any inland water body, you've got a moderating influence there, and you've got mild winters, but then you've also got sort of a refreshing element in those summers. So this is from a producer called La Prendina. They are, I guess, relatively new in the Italian states, because we have some incredibly historic Italian producers. But they were founded in 1958 when they first acquired some vineyards. But the actual estate, and this comes from two different vineyards on the estate. The estate, there are records that date back to the 14th century around this estate. So it's been there, and vines have been grown there for really quite some time. And the family who bought this estate, they have been making wine since the mid 1800s in the nearby DOC of Custoza. So they certainly have a lot of expertise. What else was I going to say? Oh, I guess in terms of pairings, we sort of talked about the antipasti. I mean, another pairing, we are in the northeast, famous for its risottos, but I'm thinking something along the lines of a seafood risotto, or it's got enough acidity to manage a kind of creaminess of a risotto.
Absolutely,
I think.
Yeah, and I think it's creaminess without being overly decadent, it's got minerality, but nothing too earthy either. I wouldn't necessarily go for a real strong mushroom risotto with it. You would want something that's
more
got
the kind of sweetness of seafood than the like umami
of some squid or something like that. That's got the white flesh to it, rather than anything that's too deep in flavour.
Totally.
It's really delicious though.
So yeah, I think that was. I mean, for me, you've got to remember as well, being new to the society, I'm discovering many of our wines for the first time. Many of them I have been buying myself as a member for a number of years, but some of these wines I have obviously just tasted for the first time in the last couple of months. and partly looking at this selection was some of the ones which have stood out, and specifically this comes in at under £10, and that's a wine that I would just have as a go-to on my wine rack or in my fridge, actually.
And just to kind of prove the point of subjectivity when it comes to taste and preference, Andrew's just said that it's interesting because it went well with a salmon and smoked haddock kedgeree, which
it's quite strong flavors.
Yeah, very strong flavors, but maybe that smokiness is playing into the mineral savory quality to the wine. And you're getting more of the contrast, which is, you've heard us bang on so many times about salty sweet. You see how well salted caramel is done. Those contrasting flavors that you're perhaps getting with this as well is helping balance it out. And the minerality does help add some weight to it as well. So you are getting that where you're getting a dish that has the fuller flavor, it has more body to the meal. You're balancing out with the same weight to your wine. It's someone said creamy and salty aged goat cheese went very well as well.
So many options.
Delicious.
I will just, before we move on to the next wine, I will just say, if you do want to explore Pinot Bianco further, because I did mention that it is responsible for some of the most age-worthy whites in Italy, specifically grown up in the Alto Adige. So we have 2 wines from Housden. But these are wines, I tasted Pinot Bianco at a decade old, which is still so youthful, and one of the most famous cooperatives, which some of you will know of, is Cantina Tirlana. They actually keep some of their Pinot Bianco on the lees for, in some cases, I think there's something that was more than 2 decades, and it's just incredible. Like it has it has a low enough pH and a high enough acidity to seemingly keep going forever. So I would urge you, if you'd like this is a great intro to potentially explore other Pinot Biancos. But we're going to move on to the second wine.
We are. So we are moving on to the Cere Re Famosa Bianco Ravenna 2023. Just bring up a little web shot of that for you. Again, really good value. If you joined for our Italian cheese and wine pairing session last year, this may be one that you are familiar with from that. But as Victoria mentioned earlier, Famosa is probably a grape variety that not many people are familiar with in comparison to other Italian varieties. It was only last year that I discovered it myself, and it's become a real nice staple for me because again, it's got a lot of flavor going for it. It's got a lot of lovely texture and weight to it because there is some Chardonnay in the blend as well. And it's very, very good value. So I'm going to just get the map as well to just show you where we are moving to now across the top of Italy. So we are in the where are we? We are in Emilia-Romagna. So we are going west. So here we go. Where you've got the little leaning tower of Pisa. We are now in this area, so still northern, which I find can be a bit surprising with the amount of ripeness of the fruit that you're getting in this wine. It's that really lovely peachy apricot stone fruit. Famosa is the grape variety. There's actually 2 Famosa varieties in Italy, Famosa of Cesena and Famosa de Pesaro or Rimini. This is Famosa of Cesena. Or it may be Cesena. If anyone is an Italian speaker, do jump in and let us know. And it's been grown for centuries in Romagna, mostly in the countryside around Cesena. It's got really intense aromatics. Sometimes has a bit more of a rose petal perfume to it, but also crisp and fresh. And I think it's important to perhaps note that when we're talking about the rose petals in this context, it's more of the, if you think of like a yellow rose or like a more peachy pink scented rose, rather than the headier red rose, because you can get that note coming through in some of the red wines of Italy as well. So it's, it's a really...
I like
really
that point. Sorry, I think it's Richard. I can't see that in terms of the lime and the almonds. I think like that sort of white almonds, almost like almost peeled almonds. But actually, this is quite obviously we planned it this way. We've gone from a non-aromatic grape variety to an aromatic grape variety. And when I first tasted this, I actually didn't necessarily get that floral character. I was kind of more, well, I was looking at my notes and it was more like lemon balm, sort of more herbal. But I am getting roses today.
Yeah. But it's that fresh rose. I get often quite a lot of like that sort of lemon thyme as well, which kind of balances your herbal and your floral perfumed quality to it. Nadia's saying the Chardonnay flavour comes through quite strongly, but it is delicious, which I think is a great thing for this wine, that if you think of more international varieties that you perhaps enjoy, and if that is a sort of a dominant flavour for you, then that lovely ripeness and structure is something that you will enjoy in this wine. I think it's really nicely balanced.
I think it's maybe got that yellow apple fruit of Chardonnay.
Absolutely.
I do get that, yeah.
And Richard, I agree absolutely with the almonds as well. I think it's got almost a bit of a slight like hazelnut toastiness to it as well. So, I mean, one of the things, thinking for, a food pairing, if you had like a burrata and peach salad with some nuts on there, something, it's got the weight, it's got the freshness of the acidity, it's lovely and ripe, but I also think it's so delicious. It's only 12.5%, it's a 12.5% wine, so it's a lovely wine just to enjoy as is. You don't have to work hard for it. It's not like the alcohol is trying to fight with the flavor. It's very concentrated. In terms of production, that's an interesting point. So Treué was founded in the early 60s by Valeriano Treué, and he had a family background in the agricultural sector. He acquired his first 14 hectares of Podere Sacona in the hills of Faenza, and they began producing their first 3 DOC wines of the area. So Albana, which may be another variety that you've come across.
Trebbiano, we also have.
Yeah, we're going to come on to Trebbiano and Sangiovese. And then it was in 1976 that Morena, his daughter, joined him. She developed her passion for winemaking, and it is her son Massimiliano as well that has joined her in the fold. They're supported by Emiliano Falsini of the Matura Group, who's an enologist, and all of their fruit is from their own vineyards. They now have 31 hectares planted to vine. They've got 35 hectares in full. They've really lent into vino tourism. So if you have a look on their website, it's treué.com. There's options that if you're in the area, you can stay, you can go to the swimming pool. It's very much kind of multi-vision, but their focus is still so much on their grapes and on their fruit. Their exposure is sort of southeasterly on lovely silty clay loam soil. So it works with the drainage when it's needed, but retaining moisture again when it's needed. It's that lovely mix and balance. Their plantings is sort of 4,500-4,000-ish hectares of vines per hectare.
I was going to say not that many hectares.
Vines per hectare.
35 hectares.
And they are 80 meters above sea level. Their aging is in stainless steel for 2 months, and then they do a further 2 months in bottle. But they spur cordon there as the training system, which, without going too much into spur cordoning, it means that the plants actually reduce their production of fruit. So, we've talked about if you're a keen gardener, you want your plants to really focus on their fruit or their flowers, because that's how they continue their lives. And for a winemaker or a farmer, it's how they get their produce. You don't want lots of lovely leafy, canopies. So by doing the spur cordoning, it means they are concentrating their grape bunches, which in turn concentrates the fruits, the fruit flavors, the concentrates the alcohol, the color for their red varieties. And it means that you get that lovely concentration, which comes across in that lovely peachy apricot, very ripe stone fruit that would perhaps make you think it's come from somewhere a little bit more southern in Italy, particularly with the Chardonnay, because the Chardonnay is leaning into that. If you take Burgundy as a reference, it's leaning more into that sort of Maconnais rather than Chablis style. So yeah, it's a really tasty wine.
Yeah, and we were actually saying before, we were thinking, well, what what would we suggest if you've not got the wine in front of you today, how would we suggest what comparisons would we make? And we would actually probably go to the south of Italy for the more kind of full flavored, like more sun soaked whites, for example, a Fiano or maybe even a Grillo from Sicily, because it packs so much punch for 12.5%.
Yeah.
And it does sit. I mean, I'm sure if you've tasted the Pinot Bianco and then you've just tasted this, you see how distinct they are. You go from something that's quite, actually now in retrospect seems quite restrained and quite linear, to something that's sort of really exuberant and sort of, just overflowing with delicious fruit.
It feels juicy.
Yeah, it feels like biting into a peach, right?
Yeah.
Super. Okay, so we are headed now, actually, down to the south. I just had a moment where I was thinking where we're heading. So we are now headed with our third white down to Italy's heel, so to Puglia, and to a region which you will know is mostly, very heavily associated with its reds more than its whites. We won't do a Famoso Verdecca blend, I don't think. So Puglia is famous for its rich reds, and particularly from Primitivo, and also from Negro Amaro. And the white varieties have sort of very much been in the background. So Verdecca is, as with so many of Italy's native grapes, they are native to a really specific area. And Verdecca is indigenous to Puglia. It's found almost exclusively in Taranto and Bari, these two Bari. It's probably not called Bold, Bari provinces. So basically, 97% of the hectareage, there's about 800 hectares in Italy, is found in these two provinces. And it's named after the Verdecca, the green colour of its berries. A new little bit of knowledge for me earlier this week was the fact that actually Verdecca historically was used in the region as the base wine for Cinzano vermouth. And so pretty much all of the production went into that. And it was when they had a large facility in Puglia, and it was when in the 1980s that they moved further north, that a lot of Verdecca was actually grubbed up because suddenly there was nowhere for it to go. But some producers really actually started to see the potential of the grape. Any white grape that can hold on to its acidity and freshness in a climate that is as hot as Puglia. And obviously it's grown up in this climate, so it has adapted and evolved in those conditions. But any grape variety that can do that is obviously worth pursuing. So it has undergone a revival. It's not widely seen in the UK, but you are starting to see it a little bit more on the odd wine list, in a couple of independents, this sort of thing. And it's a variety that we think has got so much character. It's sort of, as we'll taste, very fresh and crisp, but it's got this lovely herbal edge to it. And again, like from a fruit perspective, it's actually quite... Sorry, she's about to dig into some artichoke, which will be interesting to see how that works with this, because artichoke is so difficult to pair with wine. This is made for us by a really exceptional cooperative in Manduria, so Produttori di Manduria, who are famous for their old vine Primitivo, and we work with on Primitivo as well, but who are really accomplished with both Fiano and Verdecca. And I think as far as producers in the region go, they've been one of a small handful that have pushed Verdecca as a single varietal expression rather than using it in a blend. I'm just going to retaste it.
I'll tell you a little bit about my artichoke. So the reason it is that obviously artichokes are tricky to get, but the packaging tells me these ones are from Puglia.
Oh,
and I was wondering if with our, the grow together, go together, it's kind of a loose descriptor of food and wine pairing, whether it would be something, and actually noted the delicately herbal descriptor. And actually, it did.
Does it work?
Yeah, it was. I mean, feel free to try if you like.
I mean, you just spilt them all over the table, so.
But it's got obviously they do have more of a marinade on them. Perhaps if you were just having fresh artichoke or boiled artichoke, where you just scrape the flesh off, it might come across slightly different. But because these are little char-grilled artichokes, so they've taken slightly some of that harsher edge, herbal edge off. And I think, that cooking helps it not be too, it loses the bitterness, which I think could really,
it works,
not go with this. But when they're in this format, it seems to be a good pairing.
Yeah, but I think there's also something, and I don't have a huge amount of info. There's not very much information about Verdecca. It's some people that it's been confused with Verdeco of Spain. It is also known as Verdicchio in some places, but it's not Verdicchio, or at least the reference books that I've checked confirm that it is not Verdicchio and it's distinct to Puglia. But so it's quite difficult to find information on it, because I guess, as I said, it's fewer than 1,000 hectares out of 750,000 hectares in Italy. But I imagine that I hope I'm not wrong, but I imagine it's probably got fairly thick skins, because for me, there's also, one of the things we often think about with Italian whites is this sort of phenolic edge, and it can be perceived as a negative, but actually that bit of grip, if you like, tannin. I know we don't usually talk about tannins in white wines, but there is that little bit of edge to it, and that for me is also why I think it works with these marinated artichokes, because it has a bit of pithiness. In a strange way, it takes that sort of pithiness off the finish of the Verdecca when you have it with the artichokes.
Exactly. I think that's a really key point, that sometimes we do shy away from talking about tannin and the kind of slightly more astringent qualities that it can give, and just general textural qualities, regardless of whether you are looking to do particularly skin contact or not going down to the realms of like orange wines. But just in the sheer process of making the wine, there is contact of the skin on the juice, and there must be some form of transfer of those phenolics. I was thinking, even when you were just pouring the glasses, the color difference of the other two white wines that we had, this is such a deeper color, and it just goes to show that actually that must be in part from the skin as well, because if you think of the insides of a grape, they're just very much that fleshy green. You could have a row of peeled grapes, and that perhaps would be harder to identify, but then you have the different thickness and the different intensity of the green of your berries. It really comes through.
I think what's interesting here is just if you taste it and you think purely about the acidity level, we're used to high acidity in Italian wines, whether they're white or red, but this is actually, on the Italian scale, moderate acidity, and which is a pointer of its origin in the warm south. But what you get on the finish, or what I get on the finish, is I get quite a lot of kind of mouth watering. We used the word before, this, whether it's salinity or sapidity, something that's savory. And I think that's coming from the skins, and what that gives you is balance. So even though this is a bit riper, it hasn't got the same level of acidity as the Pinot Bianco, for example, but it still feels incredibly fresh. And that's actually what I love about Italian whites, is that you get this bit of grip, which brings balance overall, and it is one of the components that brings freshness, and also Moorishness with food, which is one of the reasons I love Italian wine so much.
They are, Nadia. If everyone could see the chat there.
Not sponsored by M&S, by the way. We are not.
But they are the M&S ones if you're looking for a good artichoke.
It works really well. I have to tell you all, because if that we have unfortunately sold out of this wine.
It's still available in the mixed case if you've not.
No, the mixed case is also sold out, because I think this has been a really popular tasting, and I think a lot of people have bought into the Italian Explorers case. So I'm really sorry if you haven't got it in front of you now. It has gone, but it will be back. But in terms of then, this is where it's difficult to say, well, what should you try? What's an alternative? Because Verdecca is, as I've just explained, so unique to a particular region. But I think if I'm thinking of that sort of herbal character, and maybe that sort of green fruit and green apple, and a little bit of kind of saltiness or salty minerality, then I would suggest Vermentino. Vermentino from Sardinia is made in a whole range of styles, but they're one of the examples, one that we've put on the website as the alternative. The from Melis is a similar style. Is all I'm going to say. Is similar. I'm obviously not going to say it's a like for like alternative, but just purely because we don't have this available on the website at the moment. But also, again, it has got a bit more body than the Northern White. So if you like that sort of that additional body, then looking, as we've mentioned, Fiano, perhaps Valangina, those sorts of grapes would be a good comparison in terms of what it delivers in the glass.
And in the interest of research for you all, because Sue has commented that she was enjoying it with some mozzarella, sun-dried tomatoes and basil, and it was delicious. I tried it with a pesto olive, and again, it has that lovely, the same quality of the artichokes with the lovely kind of skin,
the greenness, yeah.
But I always think of basil as quite a perfumed herb. It's a very fragrant herb, which comes in nicely with that delicately herbal quality of the wine. So it's another recommendation of
at least around the N21.
Oh, yeah. So keep an eye out on your supermarket shelves. Oh yes,
yes.
Verdeca. Yes.
Yeah, I think in the hunt, as we've talked about, the fact that lesser known grape varieties are wonderful at delivering value. And certainly one of the things I was doing at Waitrose was the first time I tasted Famoso, for example, was when I was doing a big look at varieties that weren't on the shelves currently. So yeah, it's kind of, but it's really exciting because it shows that, I mean, I think indigenous varieties and native varieties have become so much more people being, I was saying popular, but people being prepared to explore. Yeah. So in just the short term, in like the last 5 to 10 years, and it just opens up so many opportunities for you and for us as buyers. So it's really great to see these lesser known, lesser planted varieties on our shelves over here.
Yeah, I think that
means
really,
they'll stay in the ground.
Absolutely, I think it's something that, you know, when you go on holiday to Italy and you are much more likely to have these varieties by the glass when you're dining out in bars, restaurants, and then to be able to want to find it at home really helps in getting it on our shelves, so then we can make sure you can enjoy it. I mean, we haven't quite got the Italian sunshine today.
We have a little
bit of a hazy sunshine, but it's not quite as hot as it would perhaps be in Italy. Now, we're going to stay we're going to head back to the north for our first red wine, which is the Marzemino Trentino from Castelfermian. It's a 2022 vintage. So again, really great value. This is £8.95, so under £10. I know when we talk about value in wine, it can be such a subjective topic, and obviously there's a lot of things with duty and other costs to go into it, and there's no denying that perhaps if you spend a little bit more on your wine, you get a bit more of the wine for that price. But like Victoria was saying, there's no denying that these varieties, because of their perhaps their less well-knownness, it means that we can have them in this country at a really reasonable price, makes them very appealing, not just for the deliciousness of them. So we're back up to the northeast, so to Trentino and the Dolomites, so the little snow-capped mountains at the top here. And the Marzemino, the grape variety, it is primarily planted in the Trentino Alto Adige, but also in Veneto, in Emilia-Romagna, and in Lombardy as well. It's likely an offspring of Teroldego. Teroldego.
But my pronunciation isn't always great.
So which is another one of the Castelfermian wines, which is really delicious. I'm just trying to get a lovely little bottle shot for you. And it's documented in northern Italy since the 14th century, considered a very high quality grape. A fun fact, Mozart, I love that it's a fun fact. I love a fun fact in wine. Mozart refers to its pedigree in Don Giovanni, which, you know, we could just leave it there. But I won't. I'll tell you a bit more about it. It's lovely, and it's it sounds weird to say it's lovely and soft on smelling it, but actually it's the plushness of the fruit, I think, that you're getting on the nose. It's got that lovely sort of plummy, damsony red fruit to it. Maybe some wild raspberry as well as the really sort of nice cherry notes. But they smell like they've been, again, it's northern Italy, but they smell like they've had a bit of sun on them. They smell squishy. It's not overly hot, it's not super ripe, but it smells like it's had some warmth. It's really perfumed. I find this quite a lot actually with some of the Castelfermian red varieties, particularly their indigenous varieties. And I think it's perhaps, you know, with their handling as well, they're not doing sort of too much in the heaviness. They want to keep the vibrancy and the freshness of the wine. Again, it's 12.5%, so there's no competing of the alcohol with the concentration, with the fruit. It's got a little bit of residual sugar just to balance out the acidity, but not so much that it tastes super sweet or has a sort of residual sugar mouthfeel to it. The acidity is still there to counterbalance it.
Yeah, it's just that sort of, I mean, almost it's the level, it's so little you wouldn't be expected to taste it or identify it. It's purely a balancing factor. But I think I agree with you. There's so much. I love Northeastern reds for their crunch and their freshness, and the fact that they deliver this level of ripeness of fruit, as you pointed out, but as you say, at really modest alcohols. So you've got, I mean, we're in Trentino, we're in the Dolomites. You've got a lot of sunshine hours, so and you've got quite significant diurnal ranges, so you've got the temperature dropping quite a lot overnight, so it just retains this incredible freshness and energy in the wine, but you still get this gorgeous ripeness of as you said, all those kind of wild raspberry fruit, and it does have that feel of almost like macerated cherries, but then the palate has that like sour cherry tang.
Yeah, it really it's a really lovely contrasting style of wine. I think sometimes when you would just smell it, you're expecting it to be a little bit more. You're expecting it to not quite have that sharpness without, you know, that being a negative connotation, but without it being that kind of almost a slight like balsamic lift to it.
There's definitely a herbal, like a botanical,
like a nice woody herb, that like rosemary oil sort of thing coming through. I mean, in terms of the contact with skins, so the fermentation actually happens in contact with the skins and it has frequent pumping over. So that's at controlled temperatures, about 24 to 26 degrees. And the residual sugar is 6.85 grams per litre. So it's not huge amounts, but it's enough that it is noticeable, but not so much that if you wouldn't go, oh yeah, lovely, I'll have that with a piece of chocolate cake. It's not sweet enough for that, but it has that sweetness that comes through. That if you're looking at, you know, char grilled tomatoes, char grilled peppers, they also carry sweetness while having a herbal, savoury edge to them as well.
Would you chill this?
I know I suggested to you members that if your wine storage had been a little bit warm, because I know mine has, my flat is south facing, unfortunately turns into a bit of a greenhouse this time of year, to pop it in the fridge maybe sort of 10 minutes before we were due to start. And I would.
Yeah. Because the tannins are not, because the kind of the rule on reds with chilling is don't chill highly tannic wines, because it will just make those tannins feel more prominent. But the tannins they're sort of, there's a little bit of a bite to them, but they're only of a moderate level.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, in summer, in winter, in summer I would definitely chill it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm chilling everything at the moment.
It's too hot not to. So yeah, give it a chill, but a gentle chill. It's not, I think, because you don't want to lose that lovely aroma, sort of plushness and the aroma. You don't, you know, that's if you have a wine that you perhaps don't like, that's the best thing you could do is to chill it if you don't want the aromas, but you don't want to lose those here. In terms of the producer is Mezzacorona, and they are really exceptional cooperative. Yeah, we just
I'm glad it's warm in Edinburgh.
It's too warm. Oh, that's the thing as well. Everyone's room temperature is different, and it's too warm, too muggy. But yeah, good thing to chill. So Mezzacorona, they are a cooperative as well. They are the foot of the Dolomites. They've got 1,500 plus growers. They cover 2,600 hectares of Trentino vines, majority of DOCG. The first cooperative, which was Cantina Social de Metacorona, was originally established with 13 members in 1904. And then they had two further cooperatives founded in 1911 and 1922. Two of them merged in 1970, and then the third joined in 1988 to become the current entity that they are now. They produce a range of characterful single varietal wines, including Pinot Grigio and international varieties, so Chardonnay, Merlot, but they also make really exemplaries, Heraldigo and Marzemino. They use their facilities to bottle wines from the Fuero Arantio in southwest Sicily as well.
Which we also, which are also very popular with members.
So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those wines that, again, it's not an easy comparable, but if you do like the styles of, say, like Valpolicella, Bardolino, those other riper, crunchier red wines, then this would be one to go with. Or if you've had the, we've used the Heraldigo before, so if you're familiar with that and think, oh yeah, I really enjoyed that one, I would go to this as well as something to try for pairings, your general like fattier charcuterie meats.
Yes, really good with that.
I think as well, anything that's slightly creamier, so creamier soft cheeses, I would go with this as well, because then it would act almost like your fruity chutney, you know, partner. You've got the lovely, that little bit of sweetness to it while still having your slight, you know, balsamic acidic lift. It's just really delicious.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
I hope you are eating, members, if you
it's definitely
food, because
close.
What about you? It's like me hungry.
Did you want to?
I'm just having a quick look. We've got a couple of questions. There was a question, cellar temperature. Cellar temperature is an interesting one, because obviously cellar temperature was before we all had sort of central heating. I mean, I would say now cellar temperature would maybe be around sort of, this is a real test, of 12.
So, I mean, I guess, 11 degrees. Yeah. I guess, I don't know why, I would say sort of 11, but like, for example, our tasting room here, we have at sort of 15 degrees, which is actually pretty cool. And if you don't have a natural cellar, I live in a flat, so I don't have anywhere that I can sort of store at cellar temperature, hence refrigerating. But yeah, certainly below 15 degrees is a great temperature to be drinking. Most reds at, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, you know, we get into the habit of having our whites too cold and our reds too warm, but then it just sort of you don't want to knock the edges off too much of either.
I think there's a question on sort of bigger reds, like so maybe for 16 to 18 as a guideline. If I read that question correctly.
The more tannic wines, the ideal temperature. Yes, I'd say it's sort of the 16 to 18.
But you also, I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, this is also a subjective. It's also what you prefer and what you find most delicious. And so Sarah Knowles, who is our Italy bio, and she was on holiday in Puglia, I think, if it was last year or the year before, and you know, she was drinking Salici Salentino, which is a Negro Amaro based appellation. Which is not a wine that I would typically chill, because Negro Amaro is it can be quite tannic. It's rich, it's full-bodied. She was drinking that chilled every day with octopus, you know, and so I think it really depends. It depends sort of where you are. I think on a hot summer's day, I wouldn't chill Barolo. I wouldn't chill Barolo or Brunello, but for example, I would chill a Rosso di Montalcino or a Langhe Nebbiolo. So it depends.
I think it's very situational as well, isn't it? Because I'm not sure I would drink a Barolo, you know, on a hot summer's day. But I mean, that's a savouring wine.
Yes, it's an autumn wine.
Yeah.
So, was there anything else?
Yeah, there was a question from James. I don't know if you. I don't have the answers. I don't know if you do, Victoria. It's told that chilling can suppress volatile acidity effects with, say, a red Shiraz. So is not doing that for tannic wine always a rule of thumb?
I'm not sure if so it makes sense to me that that chilling would suppress volatile acidity, because essentially in chilling, you're suppressing the aromas. So that absolutely, volatile acidity is basically the aromas escaping from the wine. So that bit makes sense. I don't think I understand. It's not doing that for tannic wines. Okay, so I think we maybe just kind of did answer it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it is, but I said it is subjective. But essentially, what it will do is it will make those tannins feel harder. So if you're actually drinking with some protein, some meat, or some cheese, something that is naturally softening the impression of the tannins, then it would work. But generally speaking, like for example, I guess one grape that I would never chill. I'm saying this now. I would never chill Cabernet Sauvignon. Would you? I mean, never say never, because there might be an example of a Cabernet I haven't yet tried. But
Probably
generally speaking,
I wouldn't. Again, situational. I would turn to Cabernet Sauvignon more in the colder months, so I would want it to warm me.
But then saying that, a claret that's cool, that is at a cool temperature. I don't know. It's difficult.
Trial and error. See what you think, because I do think it. If you like those tannic flavors, if you like the strength of that, then it might work for you. And if that's where it sits with how you're enjoying it at the time, if you were having it with some high protein food, then absolutely. So yes, I mean, I would say a lot of things, James, with wine is rule of thumb when it comes to preference.
Definitely.
There's definitely a lot of things that we can talk about, winemaking techniques and how and growing environments and the effects and sort of what they will impart on a wine. But whether you enjoy it or not is not something that anyone can say for anyone else. When we're giving suggestions as well of the other wines that might be like familiar, it really is something that I think that's what's so fun about being able to explore these varieties.
There is no
wines in general. There's no right or wrong as to whether you like it. Which is quite reassuring.
And actually, because we knew we were obviously doing this tasting in the middle of, or towards the end of August, and we hoped that it would be lovely and sunny, we did choose. I mean, the last red is the most structured red in this lineup. I haven't poured. No, don't worry, I haven't poured. But actually, we did in selecting the Massimino and the Doliani, which we're about to taste now. We were selecting reds, which we personally would really enjoy drinking in summer in hot weather. And the sun is coming out in Stevenage. So our second red and our fifth wine is the Luigi Einaudi Doliani. So we are now going, we're moving from the northeast to the northwest, and we're moving to that most famous of Italy's regions, I guess, Piemonte. So just a super brief introduction to Piemonte, as it's such an important region for Italy. From a fine wine perspective, it's the second largest production region in Italy, behind Sicily, and it's predominantly, 2/3 of production is red wine production. It has got more DOCGs and DOCs than any other region in Italy, and all of those. So Piemonte, meaning at the foot of the mountain, it's surrounded on three sides by the mountains. All of the vineyards are on hillsides. It's just, it's a region that I fell in love with before I was actually even buying Italy. My first trip to Barolo was on a summer holiday, a self-guided walking tour, which definitely meant I got lost quite a few times. But that was in that really, really hot summer of 2017, actually, when the August days were sort of 36, 37 degrees. And that's when I kind of got to know the Langhe Hills and just that incredible area. It's magical. So there are, if red is the predominant production at 2/3, there are three key red grape varieties. You will know Nebbiolo from Barolo and Barbaresco, and that's regarded obviously as the most noble of those grapes, not just in Piemonte, but in Italy as a whole. And it just creates the most haunting wines, and wines that can age for decades upon decades upon decades, while also making some beautiful, youthful styles. Then you've got Barbera, and then you've got Dolcetto. So today we've got Dolcetto, although this is actually on the label, you see the name of the DOCG rather than Dolcetto. So Dolcetto, I know my words now, Dolcetto, is mostly planted in Piemonte, and mostly specifically in the Langhe, but also in Liguria, where it has a different name. I'd actually forgotten this because it was a number of years ago that I did the Italian Wine Scholar, which I highly recommend. This is a super geeky, fun qualification, but in Liguria, it's known as Ormeasco, and there's also some Dolcetto in Sardinia. The name itself, as you'll know from dolce, it means little sweet one, which is actually slightly misleading because as a style, it's always a dry wine. There aren't sweet wines made from dolcetto. Its origin, as with many historic grapes, that the exact origins are slightly unclear, but it's believed that its home is Dogliani, which is in southern Piedmont. And so we'll come on to a little bit on Dogliani, but just quickly in terms of how it fits in with Barbera and Nebbiolo. It's an earlier ripener, and it's also able to ripen on cooler sites. So historically, it always kind of got the worst sites, and was harvested sooner, and was therefore a kind of source of cash flow for wineries, while their Nebbiolos were, being aged for a long time. I always remember Sarah Knowles saying this to me. This is lunchtime wine, and it's very much in the region it's seen as lunchtime wine. But in some ways, it can therefore be sort of dismissed as a lunchtime wine, as being simple. But I actually think I think it's a really characterful grape variety. It's on the kind of Italian acidity scale, it's lower. It's lower than Barbera. It's lower than Nebbiolo. I would not describe it as low, although you do see it described in some books as low, but it's very much within the Italian framework. But it does have quite a high level of tannin. This particular example, actually, the tannins are really, really fine. They're not obtrusive at all. And then it's got this it's known for sort of almost like sour cherry and maybe a little bit blackcurrant fruit, bit of licorice.
It's
quite floral.
And it's really generous. It's very powerful. Feels too strong a descriptor, but it's pronounced. It's very much there. Like, you're not searching for the aromas that you're getting, but yeah, you're right. It's that sour cherry, that lovely.
It's quite an rich. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, but they're really like those rich red fruits. But yeah, that lovely floral, but still with a slight kind of herbal edge to it as well.
Definitely,
so lavender really comes through. We're creeping up slightly, aren't we, into the alcohol here? I think we're at 13.5. But again, it wears it well. It's not disjointed. I think in terms of serving, this is one where, if you wanted to pop this one into a decanter, if you were, serving to a crowd, it definitely wouldn't be detrimental to it. It's trying to blaze a bit for our accent.
Do you think I'm local to Stevenage?
I am born and bred Stevenage. I am doing my
you can vote on the chat before I tell you where I'm from. So just to pick up on Dogliani, because I mentioned it at the beginning. So this is now a DOCG, but actually a very recent DOCG. So less than 20 years ago, it gained its DOCG status in 2005. It is exclusively for Dolcetto. And this is where we believe it's the home of Dolcetto, but it's where you get slightly more concentration, slightly more body. Some examples, not this example, this is actually unoaked, but some of these examples are quite ambitious, and they're seeing that they're using more oak. But I love the purity of this. I mean, a sort of large old oak wouldn't take any of that away. But I really love the fact that the fruit shines through. There's a sort of transparency there. In terms of just briefly on the producer, because we are actually sort of approaching our final 15 minutes. So the estate is Altrincham. Not bad. Stalybridge. Have you heard of Stalybridge? The less posh part of Manchester. I was at a wedding in Altrincham though at the weekend. Well, not far in Hale. So the estate, the Anardi estate is actually based in Dogliani. So while they've got vineyard holdings across the Langhe, including in Barolo, and we also have their Barolo, their Canubi actually, we have on our website. So one of the top crus. We also have Barbaresco, but they're based in Dogliani with holdings elsewhere. They were founded in 1897. The eponymous Luigi Anardi himself was the second president of the Italian Republic, so formerly an economist, and he was really a pioneer of high quality Dolcetto, and he really sort of put both Dolcetto as a grape and Dogliani as the kind of home of that grape on the map. And this producer, they have over a century's experience of making Dolcetto, and they have been at the forefront of sort of the push to get it acknowledged as a DOCG, which I think is absolutely fair. And it seems there's nothing wrong with lunchtime wine, but I think this delivers a lot more than that, a lot more purity, a lot more precision. I think it's utterly delicious. I wondered what else I was going to say. Oh, in terms of food pairing, I mean, for me, I'm actually going to have pizza tonight. This would be my pizza wine. There's many wines which are great with pizza, obviously. But I would love this with pizza.
Yeah, I think anything that's got that lovely, the lovely red fruit would go with. So pizza. I might just finish up the selection of M&S bits. But yeah, I think that things that have that lovely kind of salty savouriness to them, a little bit smoky maybe. Yeah, definitely meat and tomato, that really intense concentrated flavour. But it was interesting, Richard's commented that he's not really familiar with Dolcetto but enjoyed this. It's friendly, like a decent Cru Beaujolais, but with the attitude of, say, a Cab Franc. It's friendly, funky.
I love that.
That's such a great
You've absolutely nailed it. And I think Dolcetto and Beaujolais is quite a
I think maybe like a Cherubo is like, oh, my French is as bad as my Italian, but it's got that lovely slight iron quality to it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in general, I think this particular example, as I said, they have made the tannins have lovely finesse. You can get quite a bit more structure on Dolcetto than on this example. So I think this example absolutely fits into that category. And I agree. It's got a sort of a wild, whether it's a wild herbalness or herbalness is not a word, wild herbal character. But yeah, I'm glad you've enjoyed. So I think then we're moving on to our
last wine,
our final red.
So Sue's just said they've enjoyed the Dolcetto at the weekend with barbecued venison burgers.
Oh, lovely!
Definitely buy again. They loved it. That's a great one to do. And now we're going on to the last wine, which has the longest name. So this is the Montefalco Rosso from Scacci Diavoli, and it's the 2022 vintage. Again, $13.95. So I think all of these wines are sitting under the £15, which, you know, in terms of value, friendliness, midweek ability, which isn't a term, but we'll coin it one now. It really suits. And this is our heaviest in heavy,
structured.
Most structured. Highest alcohol, most structured. It's still very delicious, and I think it's got a real approachability to it now as well. So here it is. It is a blend of 60% Sangiovese, 25% Merlot, and 15% Sangrantino. Now, Sangrantino is to Umbria what Chianti is to Tuscany, what Barolo is to Piedmont. It's known for really quite tough tannins. They can be quite astringent and stubborn, which can kind of be a little bit of a barrier when it's in some wines if it's not properly managed. But it does give this lovely, intense black fruit, violets, wild herbs, again, that balsamic, pine, not quite resinous, but definitely leaning into perhaps the more medicinal astringency, that sort of pine oil, rosemary oil. But because you've got that Merlot in there as well, it adds a softener to it. It adds a little bit of a barrier. So I think one of the ways that I like to think of it as Emma from the tasting scene, whenever she was sort of educating on Bordeaux, when you think of Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon in their and like, you know, the Cab Francs in their partnership, think of it like a bit like a donut. So you've got your Cabernet as your structure, and the Merlot is your jam in between, and you don't want to squish your donuts so the jam squirts out. So you want to keep the balance right while they complement each other. And I think the Merlot really has that influence here, while not, even though the Sagrantino is in the lowest percentage of the blend, it's so intense on its own that it's actually imparting a lot of its character while not overpowering the rest of the wine, but still making its presence felt. So you're enjoying a wine that is very much a sort of indigenous variety focused and very Italian in style, but it has that international variety of Merlot just to help its approachability slightly.
And I mean, I think I was just enjoying just smelling this, because I think it smells incredible. We've probably had it open for a couple of hours now. We haven't decanted it, but it has just had a little bit of chance to breathe. And for me, that nose, there's no other. I mean, if you doesn't matter what you think it is. If you were given that blind, you're right in Italy. It's so Italian. It's so layered, and you know, it's still a young wine, but it's got so many different levels of aroma that are kind of unfolding. And I mean, all of the characters that you said, I think that pine character is more coming out now. And if you enjoy the sort of slightly wild edge to the Dolcetto, this to me is wilder. This is kind of, it's
we're leaning into that, like that more rustic, that more kind of very hearty. This one is aged in large French oak casks for 9 months, so it does have, you know, it's not super oaky, but you are getting the oak character, while also having that time in the largeness of the casks means you're getting some lovely oxygen to it as well. So it's softening out the tannins somewhat, but while they are still there.
Yeah, you got a proper. For me, I love that chew on the finish.
Absolutely, and it's 14% alcohol, so it's our highest of all of them. It's the highest of the reds, but again, there's so much flavour and concentration that it's not sticking out. You do have the acidity of the reds. When I was, you know, first getting to wine, I think I always found acidity in red wine something it was a bit hard to kind of get to grips with as to what it really means, because often you think of acidity and white wine and it's easier to perhaps relate that to more acidic style fruits, or your fruit aromas having more of an acidic quality. You know, a lemon to your brain is more acidic than perhaps a cherry, but then when you look at it from the structural element of it, it's actually helps. It's just the building blocks of your wine, isn't it? So it's still got that lovely acidity while having the really nice tannic structure and the velvety coating that you're having to sort of chew through.
It's so definitely a food. I mean, I love it, and just tasting it here, I'm driving home, hence the spittoon. But just tasting it here, I adore it. But I wouldn't drink it without food. No. It just calls for food, doesn't it?
And again, food that has really good flavour. So things like
rich flavours,
rich charcuterie, game as well. You know, Sue mentioned venison earlier, but things like more game birds. So you know, if you're looking into like pigeon, like more like wild fowl, duck, goose. Things that, again, venison as well, things that have more intensity in their flavour. The strength of those can stand up to this is a strong wine. This is, you know, a bold wine. I love that it stands up well to a runny Taleggio. And absolutely, because it's got that pungency, perhaps, of Taleggio, and you've got those lovely proteins, which will help with the roughness of the tannin, while still neither of them are in competition of strength. In terms of producer, this is another bit of a fun one. The name translates literally as "cast out the devils." The Scaccia di Averli winery owes its eerie title to an exorcist who lived in the village by the vineyard during the 19th century. It was founded in 1884 by Prince Ugo Boncompagni Ludovici, who left Rome to dedicate himself to wine production. But since 1954, it's been owned by the Pambuffetti family. It's in the heart of Montefalco, an appellation located in the Perugia region of Umbria in central Italy. So actually not even as south as, we're not even going down as far as south as Sicily, but you've still got that bit more southern. So you're getting that bit more ripeness, that bit more warmth and sunshine. The Mediterranean climate, again, those lovely hot, dry summers, cool winters. They've got 35 hectares of wines, and they're in the fourth generation of the family. Typical clay soils mixed with sand and schist. Again, drainage when it's needed, moisture retention when it's needed, playing into the climatic region requirements. The vineyards are about 400 to 450 above sea level. And the one of the things I think is most kind of nerdy fun about this is that the winery, it's arranged into 4 stories. So the wine pressing goes from top to bottom in the course of its production. So it enters at the 4th level. The wines are fermented in wooden or stainless steel vats on the 3rd story. They then transfer down to the 1st and 2nd levels for aging. So in going deeper underground, so the 1st level is located underground. Montefalco Rosso, which is this one, ages for a year on the 2nd level, whereas they have their Montefalco Sagrantino and their Sweet Sagrantino spends 2 years in Mariques on the 1st level, which is underground. So,
and this kind of it's basically all about gravity. It's so that you're not doing any pumping, because what they don't want in a grape that's already got so much natural tannin and extract is to extract, every bit of handling of a grape, of the must, of the juice, is a potential for loss of quality. So if you're not doing any of that, you're just allowing gravity to do its job. It's sort of, it's preserving as much finesse as possible.
Absolutely, and you're getting that in here. We talked about purity of the previous wine, and this has got that purity to it as well. Even though it has had that bit of oak to it, it's not taking anything away from its its Italianness and its character. It's designed. So the Montefalco Rosso is designed, which is the one we have here, it is designed to drink younger than their Montefalco Sagrantino, which is evidenced by the fact that it's got Merlot in the blend, which does, like we said, make it a bit more approachable. But it still retains the individuality of Sagrantino. It still showcases Sagrantino as a variety in its own right. And although it is one for sort of drinking in its youth, I definitely think letting this one go for a while as well is not a bad shout. It's just those tannins will soften out, but it will have a lovely.
No, I think it's actually, when you talk about wines that you can buy at £15-ish, below £15, and age yourself, should you want to, you don't need to, but you could definitely age this. This is obviously, if you want to go and actually get stuck into the Sagrantino, we also have Scacchia Diavoli's Montefalco Sagrantino, but that is a slightly different price bracket. So I think, this is only I only tasted this earlier today, and I am absolutely blown away by it. So
it's incredible.
So very Italian. And when are we doing another tasting?
Well, that is a great question. We'll have to look at our calendar. We do have some other online tastings coming up, and I'm sure you'll be pleased to know as well, members. We are looking to next year as well, and we're starting our planning for next year's events program, and online events will still be part of that program. We would look forward to you joining us. Again, the best way to keep up to date with our events is to keep an eye on our website. We have them uploaded there. We've got things up to the end of the year on there. We've got a few of our in-person Christmas events, and I think we will be doing some online at festival ones. I've actually got, if you're looking for another food and wine event, I've got another tasting with Cocoa Runners coming up on the 28th of November, where we will be doing some chocolate and wine tasting. Keep your eyes peeled as to what we've got. But Thank you, Victoria, so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed your first online event with us.
For sure. Yes, thank you. And it's been lovely to sort of to interact a little bit with you on chat. It's been much nicer to see your faces, but this is what we have available to us. And I think it's just about saying, like, we've given you the tiniest snapshot. I mean, Italy, just a couple of weeks ago when we do some staff training on Italy, you sort of go, how can you cover even a fraction of Italy in an hour? You can't. But what you can do is sort of, I guess, whet the appetite for exploration. So it sounds like we've done that, which is brilliant. But there is so much more online. As part of our current Italian tour, an incredible selection from Sarah that was all done just before she went on maternity leave. There is so much to explore. So do get stuck in. Some of the kind of more niche varieties are selling quite quickly, so you'll see there's low stock. But there's really a lot to try. So please please branch out. If you don't usually buy something, if you usually stick to certain styles, please try something different.
Absolutely, yeah. And similar to exploring the wines, we've got a lot of really great content in terms of pieces as well to read and watch about Italian wines and Italy as a region. So I'll share some of those on the follow-up email tomorrow, if you'd like to read a little further. But thank you so much for joining us, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Salute. Cheers.